Seven keys to being happy. Do you consider yourself to be happy? It's an interesting question, right? And if you ask 1,000 people, you're probably going to get lots of different answers because happiness isn't always easy to measure. And also, it can really fluctuate based on what's going on in our lives, how we're currently feeling, what we're currently dealing with, just our natural predisposition. Some of us wake up every day and are naturally happy. Some of us wake up every day and are naturally more pessimistic or negative. And I don't know if it's nature or nurture or whatever else, but one thing that we can all mostly agree on is that in general, we'd rather be happy than unhappy. So if it's something that we all want, then I do think that it makes sense to really take a look at what it is that makes us happy and how we can impact or influence our own levels of happiness. I mean, can happiness be manufactured? Is it something that we're just sort of born with or we're not? Is it something that we're just a victim of our circumstance and our lives and we can't really control it? Do we just have to go rudderlessly and hope that everything works out? Or are there ways that we can impact our happiness consciously and deliberately so we can create that state as often as we really want? So it's interesting to determine whether or not, when we feel happy, if we can purposely change that or not, because then we have a lot of power, right? Then we have a lot of control. If we're just sort of victims to it and we're just sort of, in a situation where we can't control that, that's a lot harder and a lot more, I guess, a pessimistic view of life. But let's explore it a bit and let's see exactly what it is that makes us happy and exactly what we can do, if anything, to be able to impact that. So, happiness is obviously a very multifaceted concept. And part of it is that it's subjective anyway, because we each have our own interpretation of what it actually means. It's influenced by a lot of factors, and some of those factors are internal, and some of those factors are external. So, research, if you do the research, they've identified several key elements that ultimately contribute to what we consider to be our overall level of happiness. And so, one of those factors is social relationships. And this is a really important factor. Strong, supportive relationships are absolutely crucial for happiness. Studies show again and again that individuals with meaningful connections tend to report higher levels of well being. Now, we're not talking about having a million Facebook friends. We're not talking about having a bunch of followers. We're talking about relationships that actually have meaning and depth. So when we connect with somebody, it's about the quality of that interaction. It's about the quality of that relationship. So we all know that we've got those acquaintances or people in our lives where we may be very popular in the sense that, in our office or in our business or walking down our street or in our town, a lot of people know who we are. And that's great. And there's certainly, value in that. But where we really sort of get that happiness, extract, and where we really start to get that inner feeling of value is through connectedness. And so that connectedness really comes down to how deep and meaningful those relationships are. It's one of the reasons that family relationships are so important. Because if we have a really good family relationship, that's going to help us out overall in terms of our level of happiness because we're going to feel like we have connections to people. And those people that have those connections tend to report higher levels of well being. They, happiness, the happiest individuals, if you look at them in general, when this is studied, it has very little to do with all the, trappings of affluence or income level or any of these other things. If you look across income levels, there are very, people that make a lot of money. There are people that don't make a lot of money. And there are people that are happy and unhappy across the spectrum. I've known some people who struggle, they're paycheck to paycheck, and every time I see them, they just seem to be overjoyed about life. I've known people that are extremely wealthy, would have everything from just a physical standpoint that you could ever possibly want, and yet they're miserable. They're just not happy. And so the happiest individuals often have a really robust social network, and that provides emotional support and it fosters a sense of belonging. And I think nowadays, in particular, that's vitally important because we live in a society nowadays where, ironically, even though we're a lot more connected than we've ever been through technology, we're actually a lot more disconnected as well because these sort of relationships that are online have become the surrogate for real relationships. In the old days, I grew up pre internet. So if you grow up pre internet, if you wanted to hang out with people, I mean, we had landline phones, there was no cell phone. So you got on your bike and you went and hung out with your friends, or you got in your car and you drove to meet your friends at a particular location or whatever, or went to their house because that's basically the way that you connected. You could talk on the phone, but there was one phone per house usually. So not everybody could be on the phone at the same time. You couldn't all each have your own individual communication device, and they were wired. So you were standing in a room that's largely public usually, unless you stretch the cord into your bedroom and shut the door, where your whole family could hear your conversation. So it isn't that people didn't talk on the phone, but in general, you had a lot more FaceTime with people. There were a lot fewer things to do anyway that were technology based or that were solo that involved the screen. And so, because of that, there was a much greater sense of belonging. And so that leads to higher levels of happiness. Ironically, now we want to be in a situation where we can do so much, have access to so much, and be able to do things in a much quicker and easier way. But at the same time, it's shallow, it's hollow, and we don't have that same level of connectedness there. So that really impacts people's level of happiness. A second factor that really impacts our level of happiness is flat out positive thinking, just the way we think. Now, if you think about it, funny, right? If you think about it, really what thinking is we're having a conversation with ourselves. So we're playing back things in our mind and we're having a discussion within our own mind about various things. And there are patterns with that. There are patterns with the way that we talk to ourselves. There are patterns with the way that we talk to other people. But if we're talking to somebody else and we're being negative, somebody might say to us, hey, you know what? I'm just tired of all this negativity. Can we just talk about something good for a little bit? If we're really positive, they might say, oh, why are you happy all the time? So we get sort of a reflection of how we're feeling sometimes by other people. When it's all in our own head, we are the judge and jury on that. We're the audience and we're the speaker. So the way that we think and the things that we tell ourselves actually really matter a great deal. And because oftentimes this is subconscious and we don't really think about the way that we're doing it, the challenge here becomes we can get into some really negative patterns and not even recognize it, where we're tearing ourselves down, we're making ourselves feel terrible, and we're not even doing it on purpose. We don't even recognize it. It's just sort of the way that we were brought up or something that we developed over time. So cognitive patterns play a very significant role in happiness. People who can maintain a positive outlook, they focus on opportunities instead of threats. They tend to experience greater happiness because they see the world through the lens of possibility instead of through the lens of problem. And both are true, right? We all have problems, we all have threats, but we also all have opportunities. So it all depends on what we focus on. I remember in the old days, I was back in a network marketing business when I was in college, and I remember hearing this sales coach talking, and he was talking about this person that had encountered people that had already heard of the network marketing company. And so he tells two different stories. And he says, the one person says, hey, have you heard of, blank, whatever? And the person says, yeah. And he said, I got a call from them, said, oh, I tried to talk to five people. Three of them had already heard of it. So I didn't have any results. And he said, I got a call from another person the same day who said, oh my God, this is awesome. I talked to seven people that, five of them already heard of it. I've already signed up three of them. So it's a totally different perspective from literally essentially the same set of facts, right? And so that is really important in terms of the way that we view it. So if we look at things from a positive mind frame, that will lead to greater happiness. Now, that's not always easy, especially depending on what our predisposition is. If we tend to skew negative with the way that we think, this is going to take some effort. This is going to take a little bit of work. We got to develop this as a habit. So it includes savoring positive experiences when we're in the moment, enjoying being in the moment, and interpreting events optimistically. So when something happens, right? This is the old cliche, a door closes, another one opens, right? Every problem is another opportunity. All these other things, they're cliches, but they really are true. In business, I've experienced this a million times. There's obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. There are problems, all that kind of stuff. It's inescapable as an entrepreneur and in business. But if we treat it as though it's an end, if we treat it as though it's a negative and a failure and a problem, then we sort of internalize that and feel as though we're failing. We're letting ourselves down. We aren't being successful. If instead we treat it as something that's a real positive, as an opportunity, hey, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to come out the other way even stronger. And I'm going to prove to myself I can conquer anything. I'm going to be more resilient. It's not always easy to do that, but it is really valuable to be able to do that. And it's really important to be able to do that so we can get ourselves in the right frame of mind. And so we can always be looking at it in a positive light. The third element that impacts and affects our happiness is purpose and meaning. Purpose and meaning. Living purposely, aligning our actions with our personal values contributes significantly to happiness. So if we engage in activities that resonate with our sense of purpose, we'll in general feel a higher satisfaction in our lives. Now, this is true in a variety of fields, right? Or a variety of ways. One is vocation, career. You see a lot of people go into entrepreneurial ventures because they want to chase their purpose. They feel as though they have a calling or a purpose or something that gives them a sense of value, and they want to pursue that. And that's great because if that's the reason you're getting into it, you're going to already have the resilience you need to be able to work through the problems that you're inevitably going to encounter. So we see this from the perspective of career. There are a lot of people making a lot of money, but they're unhappy because it isn't just about the money. They don't feel a value in what they're doing. They don't see a purpose. And work is a big, big part of our lives. So if we don't enjoy it, if we don't feel purpose, if we don't get value from the actual work that we're doing, that's a big chunk of our lives where we're sort of, purposeless, valueless there. And so we need to find other ways to fill that. The other one is in our personal lives, volunteering. This is there's a really fascinating dynamic that takes place here. And I'll be the first to admit I'm not the greatest volunteer. Okay, I like to volunteer. I've always really enjoyed it when I do, but I'm not the first person to sign up. Just admittedly, I'm not, because I always feel like I have so many things going on in my life. I'm always too busy to volunteer. That said, every single time, literally to a time. So every single time I've volunteered, I've given my time, my energy, my effort to something that was just for the value of doing it. I've always felt better about myself. I've always felt more optimistic. I've always been more, happier, smiling more. There's just something about that when we put our own needs aside, when we put our own agendas aside, and we put somebody else in front of us, and we put a purpose in front of us that gives us some meaning and value, and we're helping other people. It's amazing what effect that has on our sensibility, on our mood, on every single thing about it. And it does give us value. It does give us purpose in life. And so we don't necessarily need to work in something that gives us that, but we need to find things in our lives that fuel us, that give us purpose. Volunteer for things, engage in things that matter to you, whether it's coaching or whether it's volunteering or whatever it is, take up a cause. And when we do that, we're connected to a purpose that's higher than ourselves. It's higher than our own self-interest. And as soon as we do that, the dynamic is really fascinating. In the more that we give, literally the more that we do receive. And it is an amazing thing. And even though I feel that way, I'm stubborn about it and I'm not always the first to volunteer. So it shows you how difficult and challenging it actually can be, because it is really important, but it is also something that not everybody's going to be able to do all the time. The fourth element, and this you knew was going to be on the list, but the fourth factor that does contribute, right, to our overall level of happiness is financial stability. Now, understand the word stability, right? I didn't say wealth, right? Stability and security are the things that matter. Money alone doesn't guarantee happiness. In fact, quite the opposite. It's not a great motivator. And again, if you look at all of the studies across every single financial strata, every single financial bracket, you will find people that are happy and unhappy at every single one. However, financial stability alleviates the stress in our lives, and it provides opportunities for more fulfilling experiences. We have more possibility when we are able to afford the things that we need, when all of our necessities are taken care of, particularly if we have a family. It's tremendously stressful if we worry about financially being able to afford things. Once we're at least at the level of comfort and security where we know we're financially stable, we can afford the things that we need. Now maybe we could plan a vacation, maybe we could buy that thing we really wanted to get. Great. But it doesn't mean wealth. It just means the ability to be comfortable where we are and feel stable about it. If we know that our income is stable, if we know that our job is stable, we're feeling pretty good about all of the things that we're doing with regard to that, then we're much more likely to have at least the groundwork for happiness. It in and of itself doesn't actually generate the happiness, but it allows for the happiness to be there. Because if the stress is there, it's like Maslow's old hierarchy of needs. If we can't put a roof over our head and food in our mouths, that's always going to take precedence over any sort of self-actualization or personal feelings of satisfaction or happiness, because there's fear, there's real motivation there for survival. And so when we're at that point, it's a little bit scary, it's very difficult to be happy. But the relationship between wealth and happiness is very evident in poorer societies, because if they have the infrastructure and financial improvements are there, everybody has greater well-being. If you don't have clean drinking water, that's a real problem. If you don't have the ability to get to your job or to your work, or to find opportunities because there aren't any in the economy, or there isn't a way to travel or do transportation that can get you to where you need to be able to work, those are all real problems that can really affect us. And on a personal level, if we can't afford the things that we need to survive, that can too. But there is a limit to where it doesn't matter anymore. And once we're at a level of comfort, once we're at a level of security and stability, that's really where that foundation, all that matters. Anything above and beyond that doesn't necessarily, and I would even argue the opposite. And I see this in particular with second and third generation families of wealth. If you are the generation that creates the wealth, and you didn't come from that, you have a general understanding of exactly what it's like to be without, and you have an understanding of what it takes to get there because you've done the work. Invariably, the more generations removed you get, when you have children that grow up in a household where they're so far away from any kind of daily survival or concern about finances, they have an unlimited budget, an unlimited safety net, that actually can cause a crisis of meaning and value. Because what purpose do I serve? For a lot of people, we because we're climbing, we're trying to financially get to a place where we're comfortable, we're happy, we're successful. That gives us that purpose because we're trying to do that. If we're born into that, where no matter what we do, we're not ever going to be able to make enough, or it's never going to impact the way that we live, that takes that totally off the table, for better and for worse. It gives us more opportunities. It also makes it that much more challenging to find meaning in what we're doing in our lives. And So I think it's particularly important. I remember in business school, we actually studied this in terms of family run businesses. And the fascinating fact about this is that when you have a family run business, and I don't mean mom and pop, these can be gigantic businesses, but some of them are still family owned. When the first generation, the generation that built it, they always felt such a connection to the business. It was so important to them that it was as important as whatever financial trappings or rewards they got from it. Their kids oftentimes had some connection to it because they saw the struggle their parents went through. They saw the hard work. The minute you get a generation removed from that, what you find is there's almost zero value placed on the building of the business, and the whole mentality of that next generation and beyond is all I want is the money to spend. I don't really care about all the rest of it. And there was study after study after study on this. There were trusts that were set up where the owners, the founders went out of their way to make sure that there were so many penalties to break up the company and sell it because it's the legacy they built. They wanted it to be around for generations after they were gone, that no rational person would ever break it up because they would want to just keep running it so they could keep benefiting. And the families would break it up anyway. They didn't care because they didn't work for any of it. So it didn't matter to them. That's a really important point because when we don't have a stake in needing to create it or make it happen, it's a lot harder to appreciate it. The fifth factor in happiness is health and well being, right? Physical health, this is the old, another cliche, right? We don't recognize it till it's gone. So we value our health to the extent that anytime we have an issue, we look back and say, oh, it would be great to just be healthy again. Oh, we wish we were healthy. I know I've been into fitness my entire life. And I actually tore everything in my shoulder working out a couple of years ago. And so when I couldn't use my shoulder, I had to have surgery. And I was laid up for months without being able to use it or move or anything. I couldn't wait to get back in the gym. All I did was long for being normal again. I wasn't even worried about like being big or strong or any of that other stuff. I just wanted the use of my limbs again because I couldn't use the arm. It was immobilized. I had to sit it there for a couple of months. Then I couldn't lay on my back for a few months. As soon as our health is gone, as soon as our well being is gone, or we're going through a struggle with it, all of a sudden it becomes vitally important to us. Physical health is very closely linked to happiness because when we're in good health and when we're feeling good, that enhances the quality of our life. It reduces our stress. It gives us options and ability to do things. It allows us to engage more fully in social and recreational activities. So there's a ton of things that we can do, but it also plays a role in mental health. And this is an ironic but very interesting sort of connection. So both of my sons actually experienced injuries in playing soccer. And for both of them, it was hamstring. The thing as a parent, I was not prepared for a 16, 17, 18-year-old, kid to pull a hamstring so badly that they're out of the sport for 3 months was the mental toll that it would take. Now, my kids didn't even have debilitating injuries to the extent that they needed surgery or anything. So that's even in a whole nother level. Even still, 3 months of rehab, needing to not be able to exercise, even run, walk, work out, anything. The mental toll that that took on my kids was shocking to me. I was not expecting that. I thought, oh, you have a physical problem, you fix this, you're all set, no big deal. No, they actually had a really hard time bouncing back from it mentally as well. And so our mental health in general, both as it's connected to physical health and just mental health, plays a critical role. Positive emotions are associated with better physical health. Now, sixth element, and this is something I think is so true, is gratitude and kindness have a big impact on our happiness. Ironically, right? Because gratitude is being thankful. It's not being thanked, it's being thankful. When we practice gratitude, when we acknowledge the good things in our lives and we thank people or things that we're grateful for, and we engage in acts of kindness toward other people, it significantly boosts our happiness level. And they foster positive emotions, they strengthen social bonds, but ironically, by being grateful, we actually experience more happiness. And I can speak to this personally. I actually practiced doing this. I, was not somebody that expressed enough gratitude. I recognized it. So I went on a habit of thinking of 5 things each and every day that I was really grateful for. And I have to say, after the exercise of even doing it, of just closing my eyes and feeling the gratitude, not just thinking about it intellectually, but feeling the gratitude, the difference it made in my overall mood and happiness was astounding. And it really does matter. And a seventh factor is adaptation and resilience. So, according to the set point theory, right, individuals have a baseline level of happiness that's influenced by our temperament and genetic factors. So, there is a nature part of this, it's not all nurture. So, life events can cause fluctuations in our mood, but we do return to our baseline over time. So if we have resilience in maintaining that happiness, if we're proactive and we are conscious about it, that really matters. So when we know the 7 main factors that determine our happiness, what can we do to consciously create more happiness in our lives ultimately becomes the question, right? Several factors that contribute to happiness actually can be developed or impacted through conscious effort and through lifestyle changes. So let's just talk really briefly about what things that we can do. Well, we talked about social relationships. So let's get out there. Let's build and maintain relationships. Again, I'm not talking about going to something, shaking a bunch of hands and collecting business cards or, just running around trying to meet as many people as possible. That's not about that. It's about making strong social connections. So being social matters, but also developing real meaningful interactions with family, friends, community can enhance well-being. It really, really does matter. And it doesn't have to be, strangers. It could be friends. It could be reconnecting with people that we used to be close to. Doing any of those things really makes a big difference. Cultivating a positive social network. If we create a positive social network, put ourselves in positive social environments, any of those kinds of things can really impact our happiness level. Positive thinking. Now, obviously, we have to think about thinking positively. So it could be a challenge, but it's a habit like any other. And if we develop it, we can adjust our cognitive patterns and make that optimism and make that, positivity more of just who we are. We also want to look at things with a more positive interpretation. So instead of looking at things and defaulting to the negative or the problem, let's take an optimistic outlook and focus on positive interpretations of everything that happens to us and see how that increases our happiness. Seeing the opportunities in situations instead of the threats, savoring our past experiences and our successes. Mindfulness and gratitude, spending 15 minutes a day unplugging from everything, our phone, music, turn everything off. We don't always need to listen to something. We don't always need to have sensory input. Just be in the moment. Practice mindfulness. Stay present, right? Stay in the moment. Let's reduce our stress, increase appreciation. Practice gratitude. Do a gratitude journal or think of 5 things that make you're grateful for every day. Try to make them different every day and really get in the moment and feel them. Don't just think about them intellectually, think about them, feel them. So you actually get in that moment and you feel that positive emotion well up inside you. Financial stability. Look, we might not be able to control exactly how much money we make, but we can control our finances in terms of the way we manage them. So while money doesn't make happiness, lack thereof can cause problems and stress. So let's try to live a little bit below our means, no matter what we're at, so we eliminate some of that stress. Health and well being. Let's take care of ourselves, exercise, maintain a good diet to whatever extent we can. We don't need to be crazy about it. If we have to eat fast food a day a week because we're busy, that's fine. But try to cook on the other nights of the week or try to get something, a salad or something a little bit healthier. Go for a walk, even if it's a work break, walk around the building, walk around the block, go for a run, lift some weights. Do something recreational, take up a hobby. Pickleball is awesome. Doesn't matter what age or health or whatever else you're at or how athletic you are. Pickleball is a great sport and will keep you healthy and happy. Our mental health. If we have any issues, let's consider looking at therapy. Let's forget about stigmas and everything else. Let's meditate. Let's get intervention if we need it. Get our emotional well being and resilience going. Let's find purpose and meaning, right? Let's set some goals. Let's think about things that we want to do in our lives, things that we want to accomplish, and engage in activities that are aligned with our personal values. Set meaningful goals so we can provide that sense of purpose and contribute to our long term happiness. Volunteer, help others, even if it's helping an old person. Carry a bag of groceries, or a pregnant woman carry a bag of groceries out of the grocery store. It doesn't have to be formalized. We don't need to, sign up for anything. But if we help people just in general in our daily lives and make it a goal to help two or three people or say something kind to people just out of the blue, that's a really valuable thing that impacts our own happiness. Participating in community service, helping others create and feel a sense of fulfillment can increase our own happiness by fostering connections and gratitude. Our environmental factors. Let's start to surround ourselves with positive things. If we're listening to negative garbage on the news or whatever, shut that stuff off. Spend time in nature. That's been shown to reduce stress and improve mood. Look, Norway and Finland have been ranked the happiest countries on the planet several years running. And one of the things they attribute it to is they spend a ton of time out in nature. And they're cold. So if they can do it, we can do it. Create a pleasant living environment, surround ourselves with positive things, and engage in positive activities. Go for a walk in nature. Do things that connect us to nature a little bit more than what we're doing. If we want to be happier, we can take action. We can implement real, tangible things in our lives that'll ultimately lead to greater happiness, regardless of where we're starting from. So the takeaway is that happiness is something most people want. I mean, who wants to walk around feeling crummy every day? But it can be challenging to feel happy and maintain that in the face of daily pressures and seeing all the negativity around us. But we do have some control over how we feel, and we can take proactive steps to make ourselves feel better and enjoy more happiness if we have the motivation and the discipline to do it. Like understanding what creates that feeling in us and having an awareness of how we can impact that, we now have a conscious choice. We can let life happen and react by default, or we can choose to make ourselves as happy as possible.